I'm Hiba Elias.
And I'm Chevon Drew.
And welcome to Momentum, a Race Forward podcast, where we explore how racial justice work
is showing up everywhere around us.
We are back with another episode of Momentum, a Race Forward podcast. It is my pleasure. I'm so ecstatic. Chevon is back from sabbatical. Welcome back, Chevon.
Thank you so much, Hiba.
Audience claps, cues, audience claps.
Thank you. I'm not sure if our producer injects claps, but it's not the Breakfast Club. But if we were, we would drop some of Clue's bombs for me coming back.
Absolutely. Drop them.
And thank you for that welcome. It is really good to see your face smiling.
It's good to see you too. We've missed you. How was sabbatical?
It was really good. I did a lot of self-care stuff and kind of I don't know what they call it. Work where you go and discover more about yourself and where can you improve as a person? Where can you celebrate yourself as a person? All of those things that so many Black women probably would benefit from doing, patting yourself on the back a bit and all of that. And then also getting to rest was excellent. You know, it takes time for you to come down when you've been working somewhere for a while. You may be checking your mail to try to see if anyone needs help, even though you're supposed to be off. And I think we don't always build in the time that we need to actually come down and decompress from, the race that is American businesses, nonprofit or not. You work a lot and you do need some time, I think, to just disconnect first. And then you move into that phase of rest after a couple of days when you realize, oh no, I really can rest. So I think I took advantage of it to the best of my ability. And I'm really glad I had the opportunity to do it. I learned a lot.
I'm so glad you did. I know for me, when I was on sabbatical, it took me about a month to even detach and come down off of what my day-to-days were. And I didn't even know where to start. What do I do with myself now? Because I'm so in tune with my day-to-day work, my calendaring, it was crazy. But I'm glad that you took that time. I hope that you've set up boundaries. I hope that you've set up a new system that will work for you so you don't feel fatigued, tired, and burnt out. And this goes for everyone in our audience. And self-care. We can't stress that enough.
Absolutely. I want to acknowledge together, Hiba, that there is a heavy moment going on across the country, really, with so many people tuning into legal cases regarding Kyle Rittenhouse and the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. These types of cases that are related to racial justice or racial injustice, it can really cause people to feel like they can't turn away. And I just want to acknowledge that it's been a heavy moment for a lot of people. Race Forward did put up a statement. We have a statement on the website about the Kyle Rittenhouse case and the Ahmaud Arbery killing. I think people should go and take a look at that. And I also think now's the moment, Hiba, if there's anything that you want to express about it, I really think we can just take a moment to acknowledge how hard this has been. And I'm curious to also know how you've been managing.
I know we expressed things briefly before we started to record, but I genuinely, during these times, during the case, I did not want to highlight Kyle Rittenhouse's name. I didn't want to give him a platform. And that another part of it was just the self-care piece, right? I'm drained. I'm not a spokesperson for the Black community, right? I can only speak for myself, but I know a lot of people that do feel this way. We're drained. So I kind of took a backseat in acting out or even, being on the forefront and communicating or talking about this case. I was completely mentally checked out, emotionally checked out as well. Emotionally be tied to these verdicts and these cases, it's draining as hell as a Black woman in this world, in this country. So I decided to kind of tune out and take care of myself and take care of my mental and take care of my emotions. The other piece that I briefly expressed to you, Chevon, before we started recording is that I do not want to give Kyle Rittenhouse a platform. I do not want to talk about him. I do not want to reiterate what's happened in the case. I am just completely turned off by his actions and choose not to speak on that. And that's why I hope that we can navigate this conversation to advocate self-care during times like this and, For everyone who's listening who feels this way, if you don't feel this way, if you do feel this way, take care of yourself first and everything comes after. How do you feel, Chevon? What's going on with your mental, your heart?
Similarly, I did not invest a lot of time or attention in following the play-by-play of the case live on TV or anything like that. I remember being on a call with someone who was following the case, and I remember the person being pretty distracted at random moments during our phone call, just really having clearly an emotional reaction to what was going on. But I really wasn't so concerned about the etiquette of it. I was more concerned about the person. Like, wow, I've been there where something is happening that is racially unjust, or something is happening behind a protest that is really shocking or violent. I'm a person who can have very big emotions myself. So now that I've actually worked in therapy on how do you handle big emotions, it's more clear to me sometimes when I or someone else is struggling to manage them. So really, it was an empathy moment for me of like, wow, this must be what I have been like or can be like when something painful is going on, and whether you know what's going on for me or not, or maybe it's something, it's professional or maybe it's personal. And if I'm struggling to contain or manage the emotion, it can be a huge distraction for me, for people around me. And I was just like, wow, I feel like I learned a lot on sabbatical about this type of thing. And I just encouraged the person to turn it off, frankly, because I wasn't really worried about. I feel like when you have that empathy and awareness, you become more concerned about the person and less focused only on the behavior. Why don't we just turn that off and let's talk for 5 minutes about how you're feeling? And then we'll be able to move forward after we acknowledge that you are probably sick of seeing stuff like this and it's hurting you to watch it again. But we can acknowledge that before we try to, move on with this call. So I feel like that's what I was doing for myself as well, was just like keeping in touch with my emotions and realizing that my emotions did not want to delve deep into watching that case. So what I did instead was, like, I watched, I think, Drink Champs. I let that
Shout outs
stream
to Drink Champs.
while people were watching the case during the day. I would work and I would let Drink Champs stream. Nori has like similar, like very up energy to me. And so I kind of get his whole, like, he interrupts people. He's got a lot of ideas, thoughts, and questions. He's excitable. I get that. And so I kind of like moved in that direction. And I watched maybe like some of the Wu-Tang interviews and stuff like that he was doing. I loved seeing Raekwon with like the green smoothie, and they're all talking about like health, and Ghostface is talking about how the system needs to change in terms of the courts and policing and all of that. And I'm like, look how far hip hop has come.
Like, yes.
I just loved it. It made me feel better. It made me feel like systemic conversations are now happening in unexpected spaces, which is what Race Forward had worked for so long, So I spent my time a different way. So I would encourage folks to do that.
I think a few other thoughts that crossed my mind after listening to the verdict or after hearing the verdict was, what does this mean for future protests? It's like Black people have been experiencing this for years on end. So the thought for us, it's like, do we continue? Is this something that we should prepare for? I feel like all Black protesters have prepared for some sort of violence against them. And what does this look like as a whole, right? Like, what does protesting look like as a whole now? Just wanted to name those things too.
Yeah, I think there are some examples in history that people can look to and look up regarding what happens when white people get involved in Black movement spaces in terms of like making yourself visible, trying to get involved in voting rights work, all of that types of work. There is a risk factor. I think that's why some people actually don't do it. Sometimes people struggle to kind of join something where they understand the risk and they aren't willing to make themselves uncomfortable. So shout out to everyone that is involved in movement spaces and movement work. There is an inherent risk, no matter your race. We definitely have a multiracial organization here, and people work hard, but they also know that they're not perfectly safe in any type of way. So it's something you have to decide on yourself, what part of the movement you want to get involved with. You don't all have to be on the streets. There are different ways to get involved. So I think that's something to think about also. And of course, our condolences to, the people who have now to bury their family members.
CEO, author, and media commentator Joshua DuBois is one of the country's top voices on community partnerships, issues impacting African Americans, and religion in the public square. Joshua grew up in Nashville, the son of an African Methodist Episcopalian pastor, and his mother is a strategist at a leading academic medical center. Joshua led the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships under President Obama. Joshua is now CEO of Values Partnership, one of the country's top social impact agencies. Engage, a new platform connecting brands and organizations navigating our fast-changing culture with diverse cultural leaders. Author of the best-selling book, The President's Devotional, the daily readings that inspired President Obama, and a frequent media commentator that has been featured in the New York Times, The Washington Post, ABC News, This Week, CNN, and more. He was named to Oprah's Super Soul 100 list of visionaries and influential leaders in 2016 and Ebony's Magazine's Power 150 list of the most influential African Americans in the country.
Hey, Joshua, thank you for being with us today. I read that you were raised in an Episcopalian home. And so I had kind of two questions. How did that influence the work you're doing? And then also, aren't Episcopalians the people that let me attend their church in jeans when I was young?
Yeah, but there's a slight difference. We were African Methodist Episcopal, so AME. So it's a remix on Episcopal. And so you, unlike like a Pentecostal church where you definitely couldn't wear jeans, you could wear jeans in my church, but it would be accompanied with heavy side eyes from my great grandmother and the other people sitting next to you in the pew. And so you could do it. It wasn't as strict as some other places, but it definitely would be accompanied by a little bit of shade inside the church house. So that's what the AME church is. But no, it was the huge part of my upbringing. My dad is an AME minister, and just kind of threaded through my life early on. It certainly impacted my work in the Obama administration and in the White House, developing an understanding of faith-based communities. The AME Church is actually a pretty activist and progressive community when it comes to African-American denominations in particular. And so seeing faith as a force for social good, for social change, it was grown. The church grew out of protest. It was Richard Allen in Philadelphia in the late 1700s and early 1800s, started the AME Church because he was praying in an Episcopal church at the altar, and someone tapped him on the shoulder and said he had to get up to make space for white parishioners. And he said, that's ridiculous. And so they went off and started the AME Church. And so this notion of the church as a vocal sort of megaphone for social change is kind of what the AME Church started in. And that was a real sort of formative part.
That was really educational. And you're right. If I remember, it was a white Episcopalian church and we had a blast. I was like, you could come at noon and wear jeans. I'm going with my friends. Like, let me visit your church.
I mean, they might have happy hour in church. I mean, they got a lot going on.
It was fun, but thank you for that. The racial element to that was actually really interesting too. I'm going to pass it back to Hiba.
I'm just catching a couple chuckles back here. I had the privilege of watching a few interviews, and in one of your interviews, you had mentioned, well, this question is for our audience members who are tied to spirit and are grounded or even maybe struggling a bit with spirituality. In one of your past interviews, you mentioned that you veered away from faith at times. What drew you back to your faith, and what are some words of advice that you can give to those who may be in the same place?
Yeah, I think what pushed me away initially, and it wasn't anyone's fault other than my own, but I was very turned off by the bureaucracy of religion, right? The organizations and the times you have to show up and be a certain way and, do a certain thing, the ritual, etc. And it felt like it was a ritual without relationship, right? And with the people around me or with the God above. And so I stepped away for a long time in college, but it was actually, I'd always gone to like larger churches with a whole lot of infrastructure around them. It was that bureaucracy. And then a friend invited me to a very small congregation that didn't have a whole lot, very few people, met in the auditorium of a middle school. And so it didn't have any of the like travel. I'm like, what kind of place is this? But it was much more about relationship. It was about relationship with the people around me, more about my relationship with God. And so I almost had to strip everything else away to get to the real, to get to the essence of my faith. And so that was kind of what brought me back, was actually this little congregation. I moved from Nashville, then to Ohio, and then to Boston. And a little congregation in Boston that sort of brought me back. And so, yeah, that was a little bit before the White House, but that's kind of what brought me back to faith.
Wow. Beautiful. I know that you've been the president's faith advisor. What was the president's reaction to your daily verses that you shared with him? And do you remember any specific verse that he explicitly loved or intentionally like moved him and you got a gut reaction like, wow, this was it for me?
Yeah, absolutely. One of them was honestly the first one I ever sent. So it was in the middle of the 2008 campaign, and I grew really close with him over time, and now consider him President Obama, mentor and a dear friend. But at the time, I was just kind of a junior staffer, didn't know him well at all. And he was a United States Senator, and so you're not supposed to like reach out to United States senators. And so I asked Reggie Love, his body guy, the person that kind of goes with him everywhere, told Reggie like, hey man, I don't know where this is coming from, but I just feel like he needs a point of reflection to start his day, to sort of ground him, and I want to send it to him. And do you think it's a good idea? And if so, could you give me his email address? And Reggie said, I'll give you his email address, but I think it's a terrible idea. I think you're going to get fired. And so he gave me the email address, and I just, kind of took a deep breath and said a prayer and sent over the first reflection. It was a really simple meditation on the 23rd Psalms about how God leads us beside still waters and restores our soul, and then a poem called The Faith of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. Just something about how you can remove yourself from the busyness of life and go to places that restore you. And I sent it off to him, and initially he didn't respond. 10, 15 minutes go by. I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to call my mother and tell her I'm about to get fired from this job. But after about 30 minutes, he wrote back and popped up on my phone, and he was like, appreciate this, Joshua. I don't know how you did this, but this was just what I needed today. Would you mind sending these to me every morning? And so that's kind of how it started. And just appreciate that God allowed me to be a source of support for this wonderful man over the years.
Talk about definition of like taking risks and like nailing it. That's amazing. I think anybody that's listening that's holding back on doing something or saying something to get to where you need to get, like, I don't think you've done that intentionally to get closer to him, but it was something from your spirit, something from your heart. And I think that's why it worked, right? Like when you do things with pure intention, it draws you closer to where you're supposed to be in life. So shout outs to that. That kind of like did something here.
It's one of my philosophies, and because I've been racked with doubt, or is this the right thing to do, and so forth. But like you said, when your intentions are pure, I feel like you should leap out there, send that email, make that call, take that step. There's another poem that he really liked from Pablo Neruda. It concludes with this line, and the heavens will open. Like just jump out there and the heavens will open. So yeah.
Yes, I was feeling that. I really was feeling moved. Sorry. So I kind of lost my words. I was like, oh my God, he's so right. You got to jump out there. Okay. So you recently launched the Gauge app with your co-founder. Is there an elevator pitch that you would use to tell our audience what the app does?
I think the biggest thing is that right now, thought leaders in communities, leaders in culture, sometimes people call them influencers, but I think that's not a full way of describing folks who really know communities well. They have a lot of ways to get value and to be valued for their platforms. Gauge is the first opportunity for folks like that to be valued for their wisdom, for their brilliance, for their minds. And so what we've done here, and we're so excited by the progress, and folks can find out more at gauge.ai, but we basically convened a community of over 13,000 leaders in culture, leaders in the African American community, Latinx community, LGBTQIA leaders. We're also hyper cognizant of the intersectionalities around, the communities we engage, leaders in the disability community and so forth, folks who have spent time working and organizing and knowing those communities really well. And we connect them with decision makers and major organizations, major brands and so forth that want to engage those communities, and so that they can ask them, before we launch this new racial equity campaign, or before we launch this new effort to advertise and engage this community, is this the right approach? Are we being sensitive? Are we not? Are there new opportunities we're not thinking about, et cetera? And so we've developed basically an app where brand leaders can go on and ask diverse communities those questions, and where leaders in communities can respond and share video messages, audio messages, takes on the issues of the day, et cetera, and be compensated for sharing their wisdom. We believe in that transfer of value from these organizations to creators and thought leaders in diverse communities. And so we have over 13,000 folks on the platform now. People are loving, engaging on the Gauge app, and they're shaping some major decisions and major initiatives.
Can you talk to us about how corporations may have shaped public perception of various racial groups like Black people in America, African Americans, Asians, or other immigrant groups of color, for example?
Well, there's been some really bad ways that they've done that in the past, right? So I have a beautiful little baby girl, 4 years old, Adelaide, and as a father raising a young Black child, like it's devastating to me that her early standards of beauty were shaped by the princesses on Frozen, right? And so forth. And we are very, pro-Black and very thoughtful about who we are. But I have my son going to school because of the images he sees and says, Daddy, my hair is up. I want down hair. I want down hair like my friend, right? And so having to unpack all of that is some ways that I think our culture has shaped kids for, not for the good, but we're seeing some folks do some really good things. And we are honored to be kind of a part of that process. So one of our Gauge subscribers, Sephora, for example, launched a campaign recently called Black Beauty is Beauty, right? And how the root of the beauty industry in many cases was Black folks. And so they actually worked with thought leaders on Gauge to shape that message, to shape the content all the way through, to refine everything from the script to the visuals that you see. And it was very, very well received. And it's the kind of thing that, like, if my daughter sees that on the television advertising, like, oh, wait a minute, so I'm the standard of beauty? I'm not the exception, I'm the standard. So that's one thing. We worked a lot with Procter & Gamble on their short films related to race, including a recent one called Widen the Screen about how people of color are perceived, another one called about the look that Black men get as they navigate the world frequently. There's one called The Talk, which was a little bit before us, but around sort of the talk that parents of color have to have with their kids. So yeah, we're entering, I think, a new phase where people are being more intentional, but a big part of that intentionality has to be, don't just create this on your own, bring in those who have a stake in it and help and bring them into the process.
I'm thinking about the difference between building inclusive brands versus building inclusive companies. Do you want to talk about where your work is fitting in? Is it more about helping to build an inclusive company eventually? Like, are people going to recruit from this app eventually? Or is it more about keeping folks independent and focusing on the brand building itself and getting these creators and community connected, immersed folks paid?
What a brilliant distinction between the two. And it's so funny that you asked that because it's something that we're exploring right now. Some of it is driven by us. And on the consulting side of our work, separate from the market research, we come into organizations and really tell them the truth about where they are and where they need to be and hopefully help them get there. But some of our subscribers, even on the research, on the brand side, have said, okay, we can build our brand as much as we want to, but we're having trouble recruiting diverse talent and building the next generation and so forth. So how can we leverage this platform to do that? Right now, the majority of the work is kind of brand focused. What are you putting out into the world? But we have subscribers that are beginning to ask questions, how should we build a more diverse pipeline? How should we engage our employees from underrepresented backgrounds in different ways?
Great. I'm glad you didn't give away any secrets yet about where that may go, but I'm glad that you also are having those talks. What would you say to people who think that equity should also be in the startups themselves? So, for example, do influencers of color get profit sharing with the app? Do they have an equity stake in the app? What do you have to say about that type of equity?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's something that we're always exploring. I would say our number one sort of budget line driver of cost, which we're proud of, is direct payments back to thought leaders and creators and influencers.
I like that. You speak my language, Josh.
But more than everything else, right? And so, there's an individual survey payment that may be a little lower, but then once a brand wants to go one-on-one, it may be $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 to have a conversation with these folks. And we are unashamed about that, right? And so you have people that were filing their taxes last year that are just responding to things that they enjoy on an app, but we're able to look and say, wow, these folks were meaningful parts of my income, like $20,000 from Gauge last year. Like what, and again, they already have ways, everybody is navigating this influencer promotion landscape. We want to say there's brilliance in our minds and our ideas that we can share it after the fact and just drag people on Twitter. That's perfectly fine. Or we can bring some of that inside earlier on and get paid for it, right? And really meaningfully shape products. So, for example, like Pinterest engaged some folks on Gauge around their inclusive hairstyle search tools. Like, what should this look like? What should we talk about? How should we build it out, et cetera? Snap is doing the same for their more inclusive camera, literally reinventing the camera so that white skin is not the default for the way that the lens picks up skin. and, working with Gage to sort of shape that as well. So you could have that kind of impact, get paid for it, honestly, not spend a ton of time because everybody's busy. So it's like, spend 30 seconds or a minute. And yeah, so that's one of the ways that we see, transferring value is by making sure that the thought leaders on our platform feel great, not just good, but great about engaging with us and feel like they're compensated for their time and their wisdom. Now, I will say we have some folks on our platform, New York Times bestselling authors and so forth, that don't need our money, and that's not why they're doing it. There are others that it is meaningful, but some folks are like, I get to talk to the CMO of Sephora on an app every morning, right? Or I get to talk to the chief comms officer at P&G and shape what they're doing next, or the ad council, or whatever the case may be. And so they see other value other than just the money in terms of engagement.
A strategy question. So strategists and brilliant minds are often misunderstood or ignored when they're actually staffers or employees at companies. Strategy can be something that feels like a mystery to people. Can you talk about how these Black strategists, who, if they were working at a largely white company, or the other strategists of color, how are they able to now get paid for the type of brilliance that sometimes is actually going overlooked if they were to be staffers at those very same companies?
Affirming it is of diverse employees that are already inside these companies. Sometimes we just bring data to back up what people of color and other marginalized groups in the company were already saying, right? Like, it's not that somebody wasn't saying this, it's that now you have a research tool that can bring insights at scale to back up, like, no, that's racist, or that's not, or you need to not just do, Pride once a year, you need to thread it through, your messaging overall, or whatever the case may be. A lot of what we are doing and seeing is that our research is often affirming of diverse perspectives that are already within organizations. So that's one thing that's important. The second thing is, yes, a lot of these brilliant folks are on the platform. I think it's important that it's a low touch, low lift for them. So George Johnson, awesome author and leader in LGBTQ and racial justice spaces, like, he can give quick feedback to Target in 10 seconds and then go about the rest of his day and be compensated for that. And that's strategy, that's advice, but it's also not taking a whole lot of his time when we all have way too much to do. So it's definitely being a tool that's used for those purposes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the 2020 uprisings and what that meant for you, your family, as a Black entrepreneur, as a person who's rooted in community and faith?
My work and our work on Julius Jones, I need to talk about CeCe Jones Davis's work first, who's the organizer in the Justice for Julius campaign, or our friend Scott Buckout, or the folks that represent justice, and just on and on, people that have been on, particularly CeCe, on the front lines for years, Pastor Keith, Joselle, who's Julius's spiritual advisor, and more. We were honored to play a role just kind of supporting those folks. And so we believe, both on the Gage side and our values partnerships consulting work, that yes, we need to run a business that is impactful and successful, but we also need to support pro bono projects and campaigns that are meaningful for us. And we're delighted to, in that way, support Justice for Julius and have advocates in that space raise their voices for Julius, or leveraging faith leaders and other community leaders to reach out to the governor. I was honored to be in touch with Julius myself. He sent me a letter. I was able to correspond with him, and just, so grateful that his life was spared, but still realizing that we may have had a little mercy, but we haven't had justice yet. And so we need to keep pushing for him to be home with his family, because he did not commit the crime that he was accused of. So yeah, grateful to God, and this, again, from my own personal perspective, for the fact that Julius is alive today, and grateful to organizers like CeCe Jones Davis and Pastor Keith and others who've been on the front lines for a very long time. For context, I've been processing these issues, as we all have, for a very long time. This was kind of part of my portfolio in the White House, and helped then President Obama on the aftermath of the massacre in Charleston, and spent a lot of time at Mother Emanuel. And so it's just one thing after another in this country of ours, right? And so I would say last year was a year that many, and this is probably the case for many of us, thought a lot more about mortality. And it's COVID, but it's also, racial inequity and the murders and assaults on Black bodies. It's just a lot for all of us to process. Driven by COVID, life expectancy among Black men, I believe, has declined by 2.9 years, which is insane to think about. Like, life expectancy, right? It's just nuts. So I think that's the first and biggest impact. I think we all probably could have predicted that the quote unquote awakening that sort of happened around the murder of George Floyd, people didn't stay woke for long, right? And now there's kind of this backlash that we're seeing around us. So I think for me, ultimately, it means that this is all a long game. It's a long journey to get folks around us to grapple with our history, with our present state. And it's about, addressing structural inequities, but also having these types of conversations and bringing these types of conversations in proximity to those who need to hear it and to wake up. I spend a lot of time with my mentors, legends in the civil rights movement. That was part of my job in the White House I was a driver for Joe Lowry, co-founder of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, on the campaign, and spent time with Dr. C.T. Vivian and others. And they were fighting this years before I was even thought of. And I think, my kids will be navigating these conversations years into the future. And so that's the biggest thing for me, is that, we are in a very short moment in history, and there's a lot of conversations and a lot of work.
I have to do my job and ask you about where folks can find you, Gage, and anything else you're doing on social. But before I do that, I'd be trying to sneak in my little personal questions. Josh, you were named to an Ebony Power List, an Oprah Power List. So just on some, For Me and Hiba, does that mean you can get us socially distant VIP versus tickets and stuff like that? Can we?
I was trying to be sitting up there next to Fat Joe at several recent verses, and it did not work out. So you just need to set expectations very low. I can get you into a White House event, if you want to see Biden in them, we'll figure that out. But
we can do that. We can momentum at the White House. I'm definitely here for that.
We have a phenomenal vice president over there too. But no, I'm still trying to unpack the verses thing myself. If Outkast ever does a verses, I will absolutely just leverage every contact, connect. You could do Outkast and Goody. That would be the only, because you need to think about, I don't think you could do Outkast and 3-6. They're just on a different level. Just can't think of another hyper thoughtful but still dirty South group that would be anywhere approaching Outkast's level. As an individual artist, you could do Outkast and Scarface potentially. Scarface may be too back in the day for y'all, but
I like what you said about Outkast and Goody. That feels like cousins battling. It's kind of cool. I thank you for going down on that tangent with me. I love tangents. Our producer sometimes loves them, but sometimes doesn't. So your social media, where do you want people to find you?
So appreciate you all creating space for these conversations. They don't happen enough. They're not contextual, and there's not enough space to actually have thoughtful conversations. So the fact that y'all are doing this and really killing the game in this space I just really appreciate that, and grateful for the opportunity to share a little bit about our passions too. So yeah, to get connected, if you want to become a Gager, go to gauge.ai and then just click the menu and click Become a Gager, and that's all. Just go to gauge.ai and then go to Become a Gager. You'll tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get you signed up for the platform. You can also download the Gauge app on App Store and the Play Store. But in order to get approved as a Gager, you have to go to gauge.ai and click Become a Gager. We'd love everyone on there. I'd love to, if y'all would think about it, the two of y'all to join and become a Gager too. It's fun. It's enjoyable. It's also, rewarding. And yeah, we need as many perspectives there as possible.
We definitely enjoyed having you. We hope to have you back. Definitely an insightful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you both, and we'll talk soon.
Folks, if you are looking for some of our recent work, we have trainings available. If you visit raceforward.org/trainings with an S, we now have a new training. It's called Decision Making for Racial Equity. So that would be level 3 in this tree of trainings we offer. Level 2 is Organizing for Racial Equity. And then, of course, the level 1, which most people are more familiar with, Building Racial Equity. So head over to raceforward.org/trainings and check out what we have to offer. And please share that link with your friends so that more people, more organizations can look into our work and build on their racial justice understanding.
Another great announcement, Race Forward has officially launched its merch store. In honor of the 40th anniversary, we've come together and we've queued up a beautiful merch store, t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, some onesies. We're happy to announce that we officially have an online store. So if you're interested, please visit raceforward.org and check out our merch store and get geared up.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in today and remind you to follow Race Forward. It's at Race Forward on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And we just encourage you to Tweet if there's any part of the episode that really moved you, any quotes from our guest, anything like that. Feel free to tweet at us and let us know. And thank you again for tuning in.
If you enjoy our episodes and are looking forward to our future episodes and haven't had a chance to listen in on any of our past episodes, you should definitely rate and subscribe to our Apple Podcasts, our Spotify, and our Pandora. We are on all 3 platforms. So please join us, subscribe so you can stay on the beat with us. Thank you.